Vanessa Pierce knocked the bouquet out of the elderly woman's hands right in front of the hotel entrance, sending flowers scattering beneath the guests' feet. The woman did not beg or become angry. She simply knelt down and picked up each stem so no one would slip. Vanessa had no idea that an old ring on that woman's hand was about to force the entire Caldwell family to confront a lie that had lasted 30 years. That afternoon, Margaret Ellis pushed her small flower cart onto the public sidewalk across from Central Park. Samuel had obtained a valid permit for the location, but she still positioned the cart close to the curb so it would not block pedestrians. Inside her coat pocket were an unpaid electricity bill and a notice that her rent was nearly due. If she sold the remaining flowers, she could cover most of both expenses without borrowing from Samuel again. A hotel employee stopped and chose a white carnation. "My mother is in the hospital," he explained. "She has always loved flowers." Margaret wrapped the flower and placed an extra sprig in his hand. "Give this to your mother." The employee tried to pay more, but she shook her head. "One flower will not make me poorer. It might make her hospital room feel a little warmer." Just after he left, Vanessa walked through the hotel's glass doors to inspect the entrance before guests arrived for her engagement party. She wore a custom-designed dress, and a photographer followed behind her while testing camera angles. Vanessa's eyes settled on Margaret's old cart, where blue delphiniums, white roses, and carnations were arranged inside faded metal buckets. "Move this cart," she ordered the security guard. "It cannot appear in the photographs of our guests arriving." The guard checked the permit and answered quietly, "Miss Pierce, she is standing on a public sidewalk, and her permit is still valid. We do not have the authority to make her leave." Margaret heard him and pushed the cart farther to one side. "I can stand closer to the curb. I will not block your guests." That was Vanessa's chance to stop, but she saw a group of guests getting out of a car and immediately raised her voice so everyone could hear. "This is an engagement party, not a marketplace for people begging for sympathy." Several people turned to look. Margaret kept her back straight. "I sell flowers, miss. I do not ask for money." Vanessa grabbed a bouquet from the cart. "Then sell them somewhere else." She threw the bouquet onto the ground. The buckets struck one another, causing several more arrangements to fall. Blue delphiniums rolled toward the entrance, and some of the stems were crushed beneath the guests' shoes. Margaret knelt down. She did not reach for the most expensive flowers first. Instead, she picked up the stems lying in the middle of the walkway so the employees and guests would not slip. The security guard bent down and apologized, but Margaret stopped him. "You did your job correctly. Do not accept blame for someone else's actions." Her words made Vanessa frown. Before she could respond, Ethan Caldwell walked out of the hotel. He was on his way to meet his Uncle Raymond, but he stopped when he saw his fiancée standing among the scattered flowers while the elderly woman knelt on the sidewalk. "What happened here?" Vanessa answered immediately. "She was bothering the guests and refused to leave. I only asked the staff to clear the entrance." Ethan looked at the permit attached to the flower cart, then at the crushed stems. Instead of calling an employee to handle the mess, he bent down beside Margaret. "Let me help you." "Your suit will get dirty," Margaret said. "It can be cleaned." Ethan gathered the undamaged flowers and placed them back in the basket. When he handed Margaret a blue delphinium, she reached out to take it. The late afternoon sunlight reflected from the blue sapphire set inside a ring with a twisted design. Ethan's hands stopped in midair. He had seen that ring every day in the only portrait of his mother hanging in his office. In the painting, Laura Caldwell wore it on her left hand, while holding a bouquet of blue delphiniums. "Where did you get that ring?" Margaret instinctively closed her hand. Vanessa stepped closer. "She probably bought a copy after researching your family. People like her know how to invent stories." Margaret looked directly at Ethan and ignored Vanessa. "It belonged to my daughter." Ethan felt his throat tighten. "What was your daughter's name?" "Laura Ellis Caldwell." The name seemed to erase every sound outside the hotel. Ethan studied Margaret's deeply lined face, searching for a memory he had never been allowed to form. Raymond had just stepped out of a car. The moment he heard Laura's name, he hurried toward them. "Ethan, do not believe her. She is a fraud." His reaction came so quickly that Ethan turned toward him. "Do you know her?" "I have never met her, but wealthy people are always approached by people like this." Raymond ordered security to remove Margaret. He could have admitted that he had known her, but instead he chose to pretend that this was the first time they had ever met. Margaret did not resist. She removed the ring and placed it in Ethan's palm. "You do not have to believe me. Look for yourself." Ethan turned the ring toward the light. Inside was an inscription faded by time. "Laura and Ethan, always home." Margaret removed an old photograph from her coat pocket. In the picture, Laura was holding Ethan as a newborn, while Margaret stood behind her wearing the same ring. Ethan turned toward Raymond. "You told me my grandmother took money and disappeared. Then why does she still have my mother's ring and a photograph that was never made public?" Raymond said nothing. Margaret opened the old cloth bag beside her flower cart. Inside were dozens of yellowed envelopes, each one addressed to Ethan Caldwell. "Because for 30 years, your grandmother never stopped writing to you." Ethan looked at the yellowed envelopes inside Margaret's bag and ordered the hotel to pause the engagement party. He invited her, Raymond, and Vanessa into a private reception room. Although the ring and photograph had shaken him, he refused to declare Margaret a relative based on emotion alone. Margaret placed the bag of letters on the table. "I am willing to provide documents and take a DNA test if necessary. I did not come here to ask for money or a place to live." She removed a copy of Laura Ellis's birth certificate, family photographs that had never appeared in the Caldwell records, 31 copies of letters, and postal receipts. 13 letters had been returned. Each envelope carried a typed note from the Caldwell office. "Ethan Caldwell does not want contact." The remaining 18 letters had never come back, leading Margaret to believe that her grandson had received them, but chosen not to respond. "Why did you not come to see me directly after I became an adult?" Ethan asked. Margaret did not avoid the question. "I stood outside a few events and watched you from a distance. But I believed the messages from the family office reflected your decision. I was afraid that if I approached you, I would force you to accept someone you did not want in your life." She tightened her hands together. "That was my pain, but it was also my mistake." Ethan turned toward Raymond. "Did you know about these letters?" Raymond sat upright, his voice still calm. "I was protecting a child who had just lost his mother from a grandmother with no financial stability. The Ellis family was not capable of caring for you at the time." He removed a statement from his briefcase and claimed that Margaret had accepted $75,000 and voluntarily surrendered her visitation rights. Margaret read it quickly, then shook her head. "I never signed this. After the funeral, I only signed for a small amount of assistance to cover burial expenses. At the time, I could barely remember how I got home." Ethan immediately called Julia Park, an investigative attorney who had no connection to the family or company legal departments. When she arrived at the hotel, Julia did not make any conclusions. She sealed the documents, created an evidence inventory, and ordered the preservation of correspondence records and all trust data. Samuel was also invited. He brought years of handwritten records, postal receipts, and photographs of Margaret preparing birthday flowers for Ethan every year. Every photograph included blue delphiniums, Laura's favorite flower. Vanessa pulled Ethan aside. "Even if she really is your relative, this is still a public relations risk. We can pay her, have her sign a confidentiality agreement, and continue the party." Margaret heard her but said nothing. Ethan looked at Vanessa and remembered the flowers she had thrown onto the ground. "You still think the problem is how the press sees us?" "I am protecting your future." "No, you are protecting an image." Ethan removed the engagement ring from Vanessa's hand and placed it in her palm. He did not humiliate her in front of the guests, but he suspended their wedding plans and ordered her to stay out of the family investigation. Julia began comparing the banking records. The $75,000 had never been transferred to Margaret's account. It had gone to Caldwell Family Services, an intermediary company managed by Raymond's attorney. Another irregularity appeared in the archive index. The entire group of files labeled Ellis Correspondence had disappeared from the main storage area. The transfer history showed that they had been moved to a private archive under Raymond's orders. Julia requested the key. Raymond refused. "Those documents belong to people who are dead. They are protected by family confidentiality." Ethan looked at the uncle who had raised him. "I am the trust beneficiary. I authorize the archive to be opened." Raymond continued to object, but Ethan required a board representative to be present so the process would be properly supervised. The private archive was opened in front of Julia, the board representative, and an archive employee. Inside the final cabinet at the end of the hallway were Margaret's 18 original letters, all still sealed. They contained photographs, birthday cards, and small bills folded carefully inside. They were not the possessions of a woman trying to buy her way back into the family. They were pieces of a modest income saved by a grandmother for the grandson she had never been allowed to meet. Julia found an internal order requiring every letter bearing the name Margaret Ellis to be sent directly to Raymond's office instead of being placed in Ethan's personal mail. Then she opened Laura's file. Inside was a handwritten envelope marked, "For Ethan when he is old enough." The handwriting matched the cards Laura had once written to her son. In the letter, Laura stated that her mother had never abandoned the family and instructed Raymond to take Ethan to Margaret if Laura did not survive. Ethan lowered himself into the nearest chair. The years he had spent believing that he had no family on his mother's side suddenly became an emptiness that someone had deliberately created. He opened the letter Margaret had sent for his 5th birthday. 5 $1 bills fell onto the table. Written on the paper were the words, "I do not know what you need, so I am sending what I earned today. I am still here." Margaret turned away to hide her tears. But the investigation did not end with the letters. Julia opened the inheritance trust ledger. Declaring that Ethan had no suitable relatives on his mother's side, had allowed Raymond to extend his control over the shares, maintain voting authority, and collect millions of dollars in management fees over the years. She placed the ledger in front of Ethan. "Raymond did not only take your grandmother away from you. Every year you believed you had no family on your mother's side, he was paid to continue controlling your life." 10 days later, the birth certificate, hospital records, family photographs, and an independent deoxyribonucleic acid test all confirmed that Margaret Ellis was Laura's mother and Ethan's maternal grandmother. Ethan called a special meeting of the Caldwell Urban Development Board. Margaret agreed to attend only after Julia promised that her name and story would not be turned into a public relations campaign to repair the company's reputation. Before the board, Raymond no longer denied blocking the letters. "I did it to protect Ethan," he said. "The Ellis family was poor and unstable at the time. I could not place a child who would inherit a large fortune in the care of someone who could not support him." Margaret did not deny her past. "Yes, I was poor. But when did poverty give you the right to tell a child that his grandmother did not love him?" Julia displayed the document claiming that Margaret had surrendered her visitation rights. She explained that no original copy had ever been filed with a court or included in the guardianship records. Margaret's signature had been copied from the funeral assistance receipt she signed after Laura died. Samuel stood and confirmed that Margaret had mailed letters regularly for years. His records, copies, and postal receipts matched the 18 unopened letters found in Raymond's private archive. Julia then opened Laura's final letter. Her voice slowed as she read the words Laura had written before her death. Laura asked Raymond to take Ethan to Margaret and stated that her mother was the only person who had never abandoned either of them. Raymond lowered his eyes, but the financial evidence was even more serious. The trust record showed that he had extended his control over Ethan's shares and maintained voting authority by claiming that Ethan had no suitable relatives on his mother's side. Each time that control was renewed, Raymond continued collecting management fees that eventually totaled millions of dollars. Ethan saw his own signature on several renewal documents. "I signed them because I trusted you," he said. "But I am also responsible for failing to read and verify them. I cannot treat myself as the only victim in this story." Raymond immediately offered to repay the money if the family handled the matter privately. "We do not need to destroy the Caldwell name over something that happened 30 years ago." Margaret looked at him. "Those 30 years are not a line in a report. They were my grandson's childhood, and the years I spent believing he did not want to see me." She rejected every agreement that exchanged money for silence. She did not ask for company shares or a position. Margaret requested that the following actions be entered into the official record. Return every letter and photograph belonging to Laura. Correct the family history publicly. Conduct an independent audit of the inheritance trust. Repay all improper management fees, and protect everyone who provided evidence. The board voted to suspend Raymond as chairman, remove his authority over the trust, and refer the financial records to the proper authorities. The disputed fees were frozen during the audit. Raymond was not convicted inside the boardroom, and he was not dragged away in front of cameras. He would face a formal investigation, repayment obligations, and consequences supported by the documents he had created himself. Ethan later met Vanessa one final time. She still did not apologize to Margaret. Instead, she gave him a statement prepared by her public relations team that described the incident outside the hotel as an unfortunate misunderstanding. Ethan ended the engagement. Caldwell also ended its media contract with Vanessa because of the conflict of interest. He did not use his influence to prevent other companies from hiring her. Vanessa's greatest consequence was losing the relationship and trust she had treated so carelessly. After the initial legal process was complete, Ethan offered to buy Margaret a luxury apartment. She refused. "If you want to know me, come have tea with me. Do not turn our reunion into an attempt to purchase the past." Margaret accepted only the money that had legally belonged to her and moved into a small but safer apartment near Samuel's flower shop. From then on, Ethan visited her every Sunday morning. They did not try to fit 30 years into one conversation. Instead, they opened the letters in chronological order, beginning with his 5th birthday and continuing through the years after he became an adult. Margaret told him the details that never appeared in the Caldwell records. She told him which soup Laura loved, how she quietly sang whenever she felt nervous, and why she always chose blue delphiniums. Laura believed their color reminded people that hope could grow again after winter. Ethan also began changing the way his company treated people like Margaret. New urban development projects were required to provide affordable selling spaces for local vendors and legal support whenever relocation could not be avoided. Samuel became one of the program's advisors, helping the company build policies from real experience instead of numbers discussed around a conference table. On the anniversary of Laura's death, Margaret gave Ethan the sapphire ring. He gently closed her hand around it. "I cannot claim this ring simply because I discovered the truth. It cannot return the 30 years we lost." Margaret placed it in his palm. "The ring is not a reward. It is only a reminder that your mother always wanted you to know the way home." In his new living room, Ethan hung Laura's portrait again. Beside it, he did not place a business photograph or a framed certificate. He placed a picture of Margaret, teaching him how to arrange a bouquet of blue delphiniums. Margaret had stood outside the hotel only because she needed to sell enough flowers to pay her bills. She had not gone there looking for a wealthy grandson. The old ring reopened a door that had been locked for 30 years. But truth, responsibility, and those Sunday mornings were what finally allowed grandmother and grandson to walk through it together. What would you have done in Ethan's place? Could you forgive the uncle who raised you, but also deliberately took away 30 years with your grandmother? Share your thoughts and continue following Stewart's stories of love, hope, and justice.